everybody wants to get united. Like, what we gotta do is meet everybody on 149th Street at the bench.
Hey dudes, welcome back to the bench. Today we're doing something special. You see, because one day I was chilling on Instagram when I got a sudden message from Goke. And he was like, "Hey yo, John, wanna be part of the Secret Riders?" I mean, how am I gonna say no to that, right? There is no saying no to that. I had commissions going on. One of them was an absolutely really difficult commission. I was doing concept art, I was working on my books. But screw all that, we're making time for this. So in today's video, I want to teach you guys a little bit about shadows and how they work. The differences between drop shadow and cast shadow. Because you know, here on the channel we do lots of teaching, so this video is not going to be much different. The only difference is, we got to do a name exchange on a wall. So I wake up early one day and I start getting my cans ready without much of a plan. And I decided, you know what, let's just go ahead and paint. Let's just go ahead and organize some cans. Wait, what cans? It's a black and white challenge. There's not much cans to organize. But I was told we could use buff paint. So you know what? I'm going to do something I haven't done in many years. We're going to use buff paint in order to fill this bad boy in. So we organize the blacks, we kind of clean up the space a little bit. We got all my tools and supplies ready, and now we're ready to paint. Now the cool thing about painting back to front is when you're doing shadows like this, you can actually start in from the fill-in and point downwards for the drop shadow. Now because the letters aren't painted yet, all the transparent paint that's going into the fill-in doesn't really matter because we're going to paint over that later. This allows us in order to fade the paint away from the letters, which gives the drop shadow an illusion as if it's fading as well. And because the letters aren't painted yet, we can easily paint over any of the transparent paint that goes into the letters themselves once we actually paint the letters. So we do that across the entire piece, and we have our drop shadow here. Proper prior planning. A saying my dad used to say all the time when I was a kid. And one I definitely should have listened to on this piece. Oh man, so I didn't have this piece well planned out. The only thing I knew going into the Secret Rider Challenge was the fact that I wanted to make some kind of like sticker effect. And we got a little bit right there. And I don't know if you guys know like the Secret Rider Challenge rules, but we're only able to use black and white and one other color. And I think on top of that we can also use transparents freely, like transparent white or black, but we can't use like the full spectrum of grays. So I can't go super in depth with all the shading, right? I can't get into all the nitty gritty. I gotta keep it just black, white, and transparent. That's it. And that should be enough in order to make this effect work out. So I figured I'll go ahead and keep the letters pretty simple. Nothing crazy, right? Just basic straight letter, you know, just rock it like that. And we'll focus more on the effect to see how that actually goes. So next up, I think we're actually gonna be working on the border, the key line, if you will, which is also gonna be white in order to give that kind of sticker effect. It turns out the little tiny roller I bought was a little bit too big for the nooks and crannies I had to get into, so we bought a little bit of a paintbrush, so like that we can really get into those difficult to reach areas. The roller will be used instead for the fill-in. Now, as I was doing the actual key line here, that being the outline around the outline, I decided to go for a 1 brush width for the key line, which I think it comes out to like 1 inch or half an inch, something along those lines. I forget the brush dimensions, but I was halfway tempted to make the key line a little bit thicker in order to give myself more room for the drop shadow. But the drop shadow that we're going to be applying to the letters themselves isn't going to be all that far away from the letters, so I felt like this was a pretty reasonable distance for the key line. After 2 coats of this bad boy, we can go ahead and move on over to the next step. So what's next? After I go ahead and I do the second layer here, I'll add a little bit of drop shadow from the letters themselves onto the sticker itself. And then after that, all we got to do is outline this bad boy and we're good. We're clean. But check it out. Let me go ahead and explain shadows to you guys a little bit because that's kind of the focus of this piece here. A drop shadow is a shadow that's caused from a 2-dimensional light source. You know when you used to draw those pictures as a kid and you would draw like the sun in the corner of the page? Think of a light source similar to that. Or just imagine like a flashlight, like a 2-dimensional flashlight on your image. This right here would be your 2-dimensional light source. And as a result, it's going to cast a shadow that does not distort in perspective in any way, shape, or form. Drop shadows are very limited in that aspect. While they're extremely useful, very effective for adding depth, they do have some restrictions they follow. That really being the defining one. The thing about drop shadows though is that they work pretty similarly to cast shadows in every other way. So if your object is directly on top of a surface, then the drop shadow isn't going to be all that visible because it's directly in between both the object and the surface. But if we begin to lift the shadow away, the shadow starts off as a hard-edged shadow, but the further we go away, the more it becomes a softer edge, and it dissipates the further and further away we go. It also becomes lighter the further away we go, and the reason for this is because, well, the more we increase the space between the object and the surface, the more light is able to fit in between those two things. So the shadow becomes lighter and lighter. Now, cast shadows, on the other hand, these bad boys are tricky. You see, these are shadows that are cast by a 3-dimensional light source. Think of something like, I don't know, a lamp in your room is a great example. You can maneuver this anywhere in your room, right? You can move it anywhere you want to. Higher, lower, left, right, doesn't matter. This is going to cast a shadow that's able to distort in perspective. It's able to go onto walls, floors, so on and so forth. It can go over objects and all that good stuff. So it's able to actually conform to different surfaces in a much more dynamic way than drop shadow ever could. And that's really the defining thing here, is it's able to distort in perspective. But not only that, cast shadows can do everything a drop shadow can do and more. So a cast shadow, just like a drop shadow, also has the same effect with objects. It gets a little bit softer and lighter the further an object gets away from the surface. And these are a lot better for showing depth, but they're not always necessary. And this means a cast shadow can have the same effect as a drop shadow, but a drop shadow doesn't necessarily always have the same effect as a cast shadow. And that's important to keep in mind. And this bad boy right here, well, that's just a drop shadow. That's it. While working on the key line, we're doing the same thing that we did previously for the drop shadow. Now that the key line is painted, we want to add some drop shadow to this. All we have to do is point towards the letter, but away from the key line in order to add that drop shadow in there. This drop shadow is going to be a lot more harsh, a lot more of a hard edge as opposed to the softer edge we previously went for. And that's why we're pointing towards the letter this time. This is going to allow us in order to get a nice sharp line towards the bottom of our new drop shadow, and all of that transparent paint is going to mist into the actual fill-in of the letter that we haven't painted yet. So we just do that across the entire piece, we clean up where we need to, and boom, we're good. Now we can go ahead and paint the letters. This took a couple of coats of paint. It wasn't just a one and done, but once we got the fill in nice and clean, it looked really cool. Dudes, I'm not gonna lie, I'm half tempted to leave it like this. I mean, I'm not going to, we're definitely gonna outline it, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy the way this looked. I mean, we should probably do a piece once I have all the grayscales, which I think I'm getting a pack of those from Montana soon, but once I have all the grayscales, maybe we'll do a piece like this, where it's no outline, just values, and with those values we can kind of differentiate the forms a little bit more. That way the letter structures will be a little more developed, and not everything will be just flat out white. But this is where we are in the piece, it's looking good so far, I'm enjoying it, and now all we gotta do left is just outline and throw a couple of shadows in there and we're good to go. Now with the sticker effect that we're doing here, we're not actually going to outline the sticker portion of it just because we do want it to maintain that depth. And the more you introduce lines into something, the less value plays a role in it. That doesn't mean value is useless, but values are absolutely necessary if you're not using line work. So not having this bit right here outlined is going to help to sell that depth to the overall image. So check it out, here's the final product. Now before we close out this video, I gotta give a massive thank you to everybody involved and people who invited me. I really do appreciate it. It was an absolute blast to do. And on that note, I'll be sure to link all of their videos in the description down below for you guys. Just in case you're watching this in the future, you can at least catch up with all their walls. Now if you guys enjoyed today's video, be sure to give it a like. It helps with the algorithm a bunch. And if you're new here, subscribe. We have the best how to do graffiti tutorials anywhere online. And you can catch that right up here. And down here, I'll link somebody else from the Secret Writer videos. Well, with all that said, thank you guys for watching.